Hello, trumpet players and musicians in general, and in fact, this new video series could actually apply to a lot of different types of performers. We are now starting a new series on performance anxiety, or some people call this stage fright. My performance history is littered from the beginning, my very first performance, up until I was about 30 years old, littered with stage fright episodes. And I'm going to share some of those with you today. And we're also going to talk about some of my students today. But before we get started, let's talk about what is performance anxiety, what is stage fright. I think the technical definition has to do with anxiety and panic with the thought of having to perform, right? I think with musicians, that's a little too vague of a definition. With musicians, we're not so interested in the panic or the anxiety if it doesn't affect our playing. If our performance is not affected, then this stuff doesn't matter. So I would like to include in the definition that we're going to go by having symptoms of panic or anxiety or fear that affect your performance. And so this can happen in a variety of different ways. My personal symptom was to get dry mouth. Whenever I get nervous, I can feel my glands underneath my tongue tighten up, and I have no saliva. Within minutes, my mouth is completely dried up, and I can't play the trumpet. If I was only a violinist or a piano player, that symptom would have nothing to do with my performance. Right? So, and there's different kinds of problems. Some people can't concentrate. Some people they shake, right? And if you're playing any kind of instrument that has to be held still, shaking is a problem. If you're going to speak in public, unless you're shaking so much that your voice starts to shake, because a lot of times when you're speaking in public, you don't want to portray a lack of confidence, and shaking like that will portray a lack of confidence. But if you're just shaking, like if your hand is just shaking by the side and you can just put it under the podium, to me that's not genuine performance anxiety. You're just a little nervous and your symptom is not getting in the way. What other symptoms do people have? They have weakness is another one. People can become so weak they can barely hold the instrument up. And the feeling of becoming slow, like when you dream and it feels like you're running through thick mud. I think from what I've heard, some people's symptoms for stage fright is that everything starts to feel so slow. And there's a reason for that, by the way. Because when our adrenaline gets pumping, our internal clock starts to go faster. If our internal clock is going faster, that means everything outside of our bodies is going slower. That's why we feel like everything's slowing down, because inside of us we're going faster. So yes, I couldn't possibly list all of these, but I believe that the key causes and the key solutions are, for the most part, the same. Now, The reason I'm going to tell you my stories is so that you understand that I'm qualified to teach about performance anxiety. I've been there, done that. This is not like, uh, I tell people about the comeback. We just finished the Comeback Player series of videos. I call it my Comeback Player Guide. 10 videos in that series. But I've never been a comeback player. And even though I feel qualified to teach comeback players because of a certain number of other things in my career that gave me that benefit to be able to see into what they need, in this case, I have intimate knowledge of what it's like to have these crash and burn stage fright scenarios. So let me tell you about some of them. My very first stage fright scenario was in 5th grade, my very first performance. And I think part of what triggered this is that the band was so small and the audience was so big. We played for the whole school assembly, and the band was 4 members strong. We had 2 trumpet players and 2 clarinets. And I remember I was okay. I was okay until I started fidgeting with my valve top. And I flicked it. And it spun, and it flew out across the stage, almost over the side of the stage. And that terrified me. I didn't know what to do. It terrified me. I'm only in 5th grade, I guess 10 years old at that point. I was terrified. I did put my horn up for the next song. I remember putting my finger on that topless valve, thinking how much this felt like this is what happens when you're nervous, right? You have these bizarre thoughts. I remember feeling that this felt so much like having a tooth missing. Having to play instantly with the valve top missing. To me, in that performance, all I could think of was how much this felt like one of my teeth was missing. And I don't remember if I played that last song or not. The way I remember it was I was frozen. So there's a good chance that I might have fingered the notes. There's a good chance I didn't play any of the notes. All I remember is just how terrified I was. Then, and I'm sure I've had others besides these. I had another in junior high. I had another huge stage fright episode. We were at some kind of contest with the band. I had a solo on the song Camelot. Da 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 da, right? From that musical. Camelot. That was my solo, right? I remember standing up for that solo, and once again, I can't remember how well I played. I think that's what happens, right? Is your mind is not on the music, right? Your mind is not on the music. That's one of the problems with stage fright is everything falls apart because you're not focused on what you're supposed to be doing. And we're going to get to that in the other videos. You're not focused on what you're supposed to be doing. And yes, I don't remember whether I played well or not. All I remember is the fear and the terror, the panic of standing up. I remember there being 3 bands set up on stage. I mean, not on stage, it was like a basketball court. 3 bands on 3 different sides of one in one corner, one in one quarter, and one in the side. And I was terrified. I don't think it went well. I don't think it went well. So, now, what else? High school, I had several episodes. And in high school, my second trumpet teacher in high school, Kenneth Capshaw, helped me find a workaround. With the dry mouth, back in those days, we had a product on the market called Gatorade Gum. And I figured out, with the help of Mr. Capshaw, I figured out that if I chewed the gum right before I played, those things, the chemicals in the gum would help get the saliva going a little bit. Water, by the way, was out of the question. Water would wash out whatever saliva I had left. And then when the water was absorbed into my skin, into the mucous membrane, I had even less lubrication in my mouth than I had before the water. So the water was not a good thing. But yes, I found gator gum. If it wasn't for that gator gum, I would not have made All-State twice. Any of the performances that I did where I did well probably would not have happened that way if I didn't have the gator gum. That was a workaround. And I encourage you, if you can't solve the mental side of it immediately, I encourage you to do what me and Kenny Capshaw did and find a workaround like that to your problem. You can find creative solutions. Now, the best solution is to not get nervous in the first place. And that is a possibility. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, this is a 5-video series. We will talk about how to not be nervous. But when you are nervous and the symptoms kick in, if you have a solution for that, you can still do the audition or the performance and not have a crash and burn scenario. Here's the thing though, there's a huge gap between crash and burn and your best work. For as long as you're only using a workaround, you're existing somewhere here between the two extremes. You cannot do your best work until you don't need the workaround anymore. You have now solved your stage fright problems. All right, so, but I want to tell you what happened in high school, how I met Mr. Capshaw. He was my judge. Now, one of these days, I'll tell you guys my cussing story. I started cussing I think I was a sophomore in high school. And I couldn't stop. It took me 20 years to stop. When people see me today, they think I'm a prim and proper because I don't cuss and I don't act like that. That was one of the hardest things I ever had to do in my life, was to stop cussing. I know most people don't try to stop. I don't like cussing. I think it's a terrible thing. And I didn't want to be doing it. But it was, like I said, it was the hardest thing. So, but that's part of my story. How I met Mr. Capshaw. I played a solo for him and he was my judge at solo contest. I started to get the dry mouth halfway through. Where I had a break in the music, an F-bomb went out. Now, I didn't mean to say an F-bomb. I had only recently begun cussing. I had no control. And the performance was going so badly that, that's what I'm saying. You lose everything, control of everything. Everything goes out the window. So I let an F-bomb um, go, and then I started playing. In fact, no, I think I got this backwards. I said the SH word first, and then I played a little bit more, and I said the F word, and then I tried to play, and at the end, I just stopped because I just couldn't go on. There was nothing left here. And by the way, that's why the first thing we ever um, talked about in the lessons was fixing that dry mouth problem. So I got my grade for my score for the solo contest, and he gave me a 4 and put a note on there saying I would have given you a 5, but it doesn't go that low. and and rightly so, right? I mean, that was in the old days when people still expected respect. Cussing around a teacher, that just wasn't done. And it shouldn't be done today either. The standards have not really changed. The people have changed. And they're just doing a bunch of stuff that's just not right. Gotta say that. Just gotta say that. Gotta put that in there. So, my band director, who was a good friend of Kenny Capshaw, told me I needed to call up Mr. Capshaw and tell him I was sorry. I needed to apologize. So he gave me the phone number. I called him up and I apologized. He accepted my apology, and then I said, "Would you be my teacher?" That's how him and I got started. Was me dropping a F-bomb in his contest. So, yes, the stage fright episodes, I had them in college. I had them in my professional life. Now, in my professional life, they, for the most part, went away. But then, I'll never forget, I was in a concert one time, playing lead in a big band, and I'm sitting there on stage, and before the last song, the conductor says, "We want to announce some jazz celebrities that are in the audience." And they announced the jazz celebrities. And I'm thinking, these guys are listening to me playing. And that last song was a total wipeout on my part. And so, and I know that makes it sound, if you have been watching my videos, you know that's not how I am. That's not how I operate. I don't think necessarily that it was the fact that they were celebrities. I think it was specifically who they were, people who I had done transcriptions of and stuff like that. People who I had a great deal of respect for, not because they are celebrities, but because they were so accomplished as players. It's not that this doesn't go against my policy of how do they put it in the Bible? I am not a respecter of persons. But just because you have that theory doesn't mean you have that practice, right? And I get better at that as I get older. But yes, that day it did matter to me who was in the audience. And it really shouldn't. That's part of what we're going to talk about. It really shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter if Maurice Andre's in the audience or your parents or your trumpet teacher. It doesn't matter. And we're going to talk about that. All right. So now let's talk briefly about how we've worked with some of the students. The main thing I want to say about the students, and this applies to you as well. I'm using my pen. Sorry about that. This applies to you as well. Everybody is an individual. So you want to take the stuff that I'm teaching here and apply it to your own life in a general sense, not a specific sense. So if I did XYZ with my student, that doesn't mean that's what I would do with you. We have to do things to very specific things to combat the stage fright in the ways that deal with, first of all, your personal symptoms. Not that we want to necessarily find a workaround. If the problem is not something that we can fix in the short term, then yes, we do need a workaround. But I do think that the symptom that you have is also a hint towards why you're having this problem. I've worked with a lot of students that had stage fright, and we've overcome it. They have overcome it completely. There are also students that I've worked with that never overcame it. And that is always a mental issue. And in a lot of ways, I think it's even wrong. There's only a certain line I will go up to. I will not pass that line. I am not a psychologist. I am not trained in any sort of therapy whatsoever. So if your problems are, in a mental sense, severe enough, it's beyond what I can help you with. I have to admit that up front. That said, please do not assume that's you. There's also this flip side of that issue, right? There's the flip side of this, and I have seen this, where students will be convinced that it's beyond help, my help. They will be convinced that there's more mental issues here than what my... So I have to tell you this up front. My solutions tend to be practical and not psychological. They manifest psychologically, which then manifests physically, but they are practical solutions. Things you can do. Do this, do that, do this, and your stage fright is gone. And that's what I'm trying to stress here. I will not try to be your shrink. That is where the line is drawn. I will not pass that line. I think it's actually an extremely unprofessional thing that some teachers do, trumpet teachers, music teachers, where they try to play the role of somebody's shrink. I think that is absolutely wrong. If that person needs a shrink, they should go get a qualified shrink. I don't know if shrink is derogatory. I hope it's not derogatory. I don't mean to be derogatory, okay? Maybe I shouldn't be using that word. But you guys know what I mean. If you need therapy, get therapy from someone that's qualified. That's not what we're talking about here. So I've had 3 types of students. I'm going to summarize that one more time. The first type are the ones where the practical stuff worked. The second type are the ones that have mental issues that are beyond my reach. And the practical stuff may help a little. But they need to go get therapy. Now, I have to tell you, out of my hundreds of students, I can only recall 2 of those. So this is not something I think that happens often. Then we have this third category of students with the stage fright who think it's mental. And because they think it's mental, won't do the other stuff that I tell them. You can't imagine how frustrating that is, right? I don't like to see them suffer like that. I've suffered through it myself. I have solutions for them that don't require them to do yoga. They don't require them to try to relax. They don't require them to take propanol or beta blockers. But they're convinced they need that. And because of that, they won't full-heartedly do the practical stuff that I give them. And that's the saddest thing. Please don't be one of those. If you have genuine need for therapy, go get therapy and then take lessons to deal with that afterwards in a practical sense. So I guess the people I'm talking to mostly here are those the first and the third. We're gonna work with the people who have basic stage fright that comes from their own behavior. Pause for effect. Most of your stage fright comes from your own behavior. You are causing your own stage fright. And that's what this video series is going to be talking about. How to recognize that and how to fix it. And what I want to try to do is those of you who think that this practical stuff will not work for you because you're too mentally far gone, I want you to at least consider the stuff that I'm saying and give it a serious, sincere effort to do this stuff that I'm talking about. And see if this stage fright stuff doesn't go away for you too. That it's not mental. That the mental problems you're having are because of stupid stuff you keep doing when you're practicing. And by the way, that's what I'm talking about. The way you practice is what's making you nervous. The way you practice is what's making you have crash and burn scenarios on stage. So we're going to talk about ways to practice that will make that go away. There's also another thing, and let me see which video that is. There is one more philosophical thing that we'll talk about. And I want to separate this from psychology. The next video, we're going to talk about forgiveness. But that's why I'm saying philosophically, to me, when we talk about philosophy, we're talking about practical stuff. So even though this isn't something that you would change in your practice necessarily, I mean, there are things you can apply to your practice in the realm of forgiveness. But even though it's not a music-related thing directly, it is still practical. There are still practical, tangible things you can do with forgiveness that will also contribute to getting away from this stage fright stuff. Okay, this is our official stage fright video series introduction. We're going to have 5 in this series, 5 videos, 4 more to come. And if you have any questions, I encourage you to leave a question in the comments below, or you can join us on Fridays, not every Friday, but some or sometimes most Fridays. We have a live stream question and answer session, and you are welcome to join us and ask your questions, or just hang out with us if you like. Other than that, God bless you, and we will see you on the next video. Thank you.